It was supposed to be one of those quiet summer afternoons our neighborhood was known for. The kind where kids ride their bikes in slow circles and parents wave from their driveways while pretending they're not keeping watch. My son had been out front all morning, proud of the little lemonade stand we built together the night before. Bright yellow sign, plastic cups stacked neatly, a pitcher full of fresh lemonade sweating in the heat. Nothing fancy, just a kid trying to earn a few dollars and feel like a tiny businessman for the first time in his life. For a while, it was perfect. Neighbors smiled, a few cars slowed down, and my son's grin grew bigger with every cup he sold. I remember thinking how rare moments like that were. Simple, peaceful, honest, and then the tires screamed. 1 second, everything felt normal. Next, there was a crash so violent it froze the entire street. By the time I ran outside, my son's lemonade stand was gone. And Karen had just taken things further than anyone thought possible. If you lived on our street, you already knew the name Karen long before you ever saw her face. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, but she didn't treat it like a volunteer position. To her, it was a throne. The rest of us were just subjects living under her rules. Every neighborhood has that one person who takes things a little too seriously. Karen took it to an entirely different level. She walked around with a clipboard like it was a badge of authority, scanning houses the way a security guard watches for criminals. Except the crimes she cared about were things like grass being a quarter-inch too long, or someone leaving their trash can out a few minutes past pickup. I once saw her kneeling in someone's yard with a measuring tape, actually checking the height of their lawn. Another time she fined a family because their Christmas lights were still up 2 days after the holiday. 2 days, not weeks. 2. And people paid the fines, not because they agreed with her, but because fighting Karen was exhausting. She wrote violation notices like they were love letters, slipping them into mailboxes with a smile that somehow felt more threatening than angry. Over time, the entire neighborhood learned the same lesson. Keep your head down, follow the rules, and hope Karen never decides to focus her attention on you. Unfortunately for us, that's exactly what happened. A few weeks before everything went wrong, my son Kelvin came into the kitchen holding a crumpled piece of paper he'd drawn on with bright markers. It was a picture of a lemonade stand stick figures, a big yellow sign, and a row of smiling lemons with little faces. He placed it on the table and looked up at me with that hopeful expression kids have when they're about to ask for something they really want. "Dad, do you think I could run a lemonade stand this summer?" There was something about the way he asked that made it impossible to say no. Maybe it was the excitement in his voice, or maybe it was the memory of being a kid myself, wanting to feel grown up for the first time. Either way, I told him we'd build one together. That weekend turned into one of those rare father-son moments you wish you could freeze in time. We cut wood in the garage, painted the stand a bright, cheerful yellow, and hung a handmade sign that read, "Kelvin's Lemonade, $1." He insisted on drawing smiling lemons along the edges, each one with a goofy little face. When the first pitcher was ready, the smell of fresh lemons and sugar drifted down the driveway. Kelvin stood proudly behind his stand, greeting neighbors like a tiny entrepreneur. People stopped by, laughing and chatting. Some even tipped him extra. For a moment, the whole street felt warm and simple again. Like nothing bad could possibly happen here. The first sign that things were about to change came late that afternoon. Kelvin had already sold a handful of cups and was glowing with the kind of pride only a kid earning his first dollars can feel. I was watching from the porch when I saw Brad walking down the street. Brad was Karen's son. About 15, tall, always carrying the same smug attitude his mother wore like perfume. He approached the stand slowly, glancing around like the whole street belonged to him. Without saying much, he grabbed the cup, filled it from the pitcher, and took a long sip. Kelvin smiled politely at first. "That'll be $1, he said in the calm, careful voice kids use when they're trying to sound grown up. Brad just laughed. "Relax," he said, taking another drink. "Put it on my tab." Kelvin looked confused but didn't argue. He was a polite kid and honestly he probably didn't know what to say. But then Brad came back again. Another cup. Another laugh. Still no money. By the third time, I could see Kelvin shifting his weight nervously behind the stand. His little hands crossed in front of him as he gathered the courage to speak. This time his voice was firmer. No money. No lemonade. Brad's smile vanished instantly. His face twisted with embarrassment and anger, especially when a couple of neighbors nearby heard the exchange. "You'll regret that," he muttered. Then he turned and stomped away down the street, and as I watched him disappear around the corner, a strange feeling settled in my chest. Because everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who he was going to tell, Karen didn't wait long. That same evening, just as Kelvin and I were packing up the stand, I saw her marching down the sidewalk with that familiar, determined stride, sunglasses on, clipboard tucked under her arm, expression tight as she'd just tasted something sour. The entire street seemed to go quiet the moment she approached. She stopped a few feet from the stand and looked it over like an inspector examining a crime scene. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she asked. Kelvin looked at me, suddenly unsure. I stepped forward and answered calmly. "My son's running a lemonade stand." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is an unauthorized business operation. HOA regulations don't allow this kind of activity on community property." I almost laughed. "Karen, this is my driveway, and I checked the rule book. There's nothing in there about lemonade stands." For a moment, her face turned red in a way that made it clear she wasn't used to being challenged. "You should remove it," she said coldly. "Immediately." "No," I replied. That single word seemed to ignite something inside her. She leaned closer, voice low but sharp. "If that stand is still here tomorrow, you're going to regret it." Then she turned and walked away. The next couple of days were strange. Every time Kelvin opened the stand, Karen's SUV would crawl past the house, slow, deliberate. Her eyes locked on the driveway like she was studying every detail. Sometimes she'd stop entirely, phone held up, taking pictures or recording video. At first, I told myself she was just trying to scare us. But deep down, a quiet feeling kept growing. Karen wasn't finished yet. The third day started like the others. Sunshine, warm air, and Kelvin out front, greeting neighbors with the kind of confidence only kids seem to find overnight. I was inside the house making a quick lunch when I heard the sound. At first, it was distant. Tires are scraping hard against pavement. Then it became a violent screech that cut through the quiet street like a knife. Before I could even process what it meant, there was a crash so loud it shook the windows. I dropped everything and ran outside. For a second, my brain refused to understand what I was looking at. Karen's SUV sat halfway up my driveway. The front bumper crushed into what used to be Kelvin's lemonade stand. The bright yellow wood we had painted together was splintered across the pavement, cups scattered everywhere, lemonade soaking into the concrete. And Kelvin. Kelvin was on the ground beside it. My heart stopped. I rushed toward him, shouting his name, my hands already shaking before I even reached him. His arm was scraped badly, blood running down toward his wrist, and his knees were raw where he'd hit the pavement. Around us, doors began slamming open as neighbors rushed outside. Voices overlapped in confusion and panic. Someone yelled to call an ambulance. Then Karen stepped out of the driver's seat. She looked at the wreckage, then at me, and instead of shock or regret, her expression hardened. "You did this," she snapped. "I warned you to remove that stand. You chose to defy the HOA." In that moment, the entire street seemed to freeze, and the anger rising inside me felt colder than anything I had ever known. Sirens filled the street within minutes. Paramedics rushed to Kelvin, while neighbors surrounded the driveway, many of them speaking at once, pointing at the destroyed stand and Karen's SUV. More than one person had already pulled out their phone, recording everything. The police listened carefully as witnesses explained what they saw. Karen tried to argue, repeating that we had violated HOA rules, but even the officers looked stunned by that excuse. Before long, she was placed in handcuffs. Watching the so-called ruler of the neighborhood sitting in the back of a police cruiser felt surreal. The authority she'd used to scare everyone for years disappeared in a single afternoon. Kelvin recovered, thankfully, and as for Karen, the consequences finally caught up with her. Sometimes standing up is worth the risk. What do you think? Did she deserve what happened next? Let me know in the comments.